A very good morning, everyone. It's really an honor for me to engage in discussions with Professor Juan Dono and with all of you, Indonesia's brightest and most distinguished minds. Thank you for having me. Before I start, let me share with you two simple observations. First, the global economy, based on nominal GDP, has increased from 3.3 trillion US dollar in 1970 to 117 trillion dollar in 2025. So it increased about 35 times. Much of this growth has been contributed by openness in trade, openness in investments and integrations. Looking ahead 50 years and beyond, economic growth will be determined by digital technologies, robotics, and AI. And the core competitiveness of a country will be decided by digital and AI skills and capabilities. The second observation is that it's true that globalization has brought positive impacts, but we should keep in mind that it also brings negative consequences, that is rising inequality. With those two backgrounds, let's discuss the Indonesian's economy in the new global economy, in the new global economic order, and how Indonesia make a strategic shift. Next. So let's discuss the global economy. Next. If we see over the last 50, 55 years, there has been a huge economic transformations. The left-hand sides are countries that shown declining trends in the manufacturing value added, and the right-hand side are countries that have experiencing increasing in the share of manufacturing value added to the global manufacturing value added. As you can see here, the left-hand side are countries, basically developed countries, group as G7 countries, the US, Germany, Japan, the UK, French, Italy. I put China at the left-hand side because China increase is in the par with other developed countries. And the right-hand side are countries that have experiencing increasing in the share of manufacturing value added, led by China, South Korea, and other developing countries. This kind of shifting from developed to developing countries have been prominent not only in the manufacturing value added, it has been prominent in the share of global total GDP, total trade, manufacturing value added, and investments. Okay, so on those four key matrices, there have been a shift in terms of share from developed countries to developing countries. This kind of shift has been triggering tensions in the global economy. Countries that used to manage the global economic power now have to relinquish their powers to developing countries led by China, South Korea, and other developing countries. Next. So there has been the geopolitical tensions that we can see starting from US-Israel aggressions on Iran, trying to monopolize its oil. It also happens in Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, and other countries. The US-China trade tensions, Trump's unconditional tariff policies. This accompanied by rising protectionist measures, stalled WTO, rising trade coercions, sanctions, and protectionist measures, as well as allied value chains that replace cost-efficient value chains. Next. So it's all has resulted in the slowdown global economy. The global economy is predicted to grow at 2.7% this year, 2.8% next year. And we need to keep in mind that the growth, the slowdown economic growth, will be accompanied by rising inequality, rising inflations, and slower purchasing power. Next, how about ASEAN? ASEAN is predicted to grow at 4.7% this year and 4.8% next year. Indonesia, by many of the agencies recorded or predicted to record at 4.7%. My personal estimations is estimate Indonesia will be growing at 3.8% to 4.3%. Well, I'm already saying that we have to be optimistic, but as an economist, it is good to be optimistic, but the most important thing, we need to be realistic. Next. So let's see the Indonesian's economic, whether Indonesia is structurally stagnant or we are going to the right directions. This is something that I want to highlight. Macro from level to quality of growth. We have been discussing targeting 6-8%, right? But we need to keep in mind what our economic growth mean. How can we transform? How can we translate economic growth into job creations, into poverty alleviations, and to increase people welfare? So it is true that we see that based on PPP, purchasing power parity, Indonesia's GDP is recorded at 5 trillion US dollar in 2025, and we are recording 17,000 US dollar GDP per capita. But again, we need to keep in mind that the growth, it's still stagnant at 5% for the last 25 years. We have a plateau economic growth. Why Indonesia has never been able to reach double-digit growth like what China has, like what Korea, like what Vietnam has been done. And another caveat is that human capital in Indonesia has been stagnant at 0.554, while Singapore has been reaching 0.88, South Korea has been reaching 0.84, and other ASEAN countries are even higher than Indonesia's human capital index. So this is again something that we should shift our lens, not only talking about the level of economic growth, but how is the quality of economic growth. From this, I think Professor Jiwandono has dived into detail on monetary policy. I'm gonna go through into the three key components: fiscal, trade and industry, and investments. On fiscal, this is something again that we need to have a strategic shifting from spending to strategic allocations. We all agree that in terms of debt, Indonesia still have manageable debt ratio to GDP at around 39-40%, even though we have rising interest rates, but overall debt are still manageable. But the key challenge here is that our tax ratio has been stagnant for the last decades at 10 to 11%. And the key is that we need to have wise spending. There has been an issue on the allocations of free lunch program on Danantara. So I think the government should be very wise in having the targeted beneficiaries. And from our calculations, the maximums of free lunch programs is only 8 trillion Indonesian rupiah for a year. That's only targeting those who are really in need of those free lunch programs. And the government can have a strategic allocations on something toward more productive, such as education, health, and infrastructure. Next, on trade in industries, as we can learn during the early days of Panglai Kim report and other scholars at that time in the early development of Indonesia, 9 out of 10 Indonesia's key export products were dominated by resource-intensive products, coal and mining. Throughout 75 years of Indonesia's independence, now we are still standing 50% of Indonesia's exported products still dominated by resource-intensive products. And exactly the same coal and palm oil and their derivative products. So this is something that we need to keep in mind, that manufacturing value added throughout the years has been stagnant at 19-20%, and the export are still dominated by resource-intensive products. So this is our homework on how we are moving from extractions towards more value creations. Next, on investments, whether you are neoclassical school or whether you're liberal or neoliberal, whether you are import substitution school or export oriented schools, everybody will be agreed that to be able to achieve economic growth, we need capital accumulations. And those capital accumulations should be translated into productivity gains. Otherwise, it will be just stagnant in there. So if we see here, this is the key signals that Indonesia should watch very carefully. I-core Indonesia has been stagnant at around 6%. That is among the highest compared to our peer countries. That's one of the reasons that investment in Indonesia is very, very inefficient. And that's why many of investors prefer our peer countries in that instead of investing in Indonesia. As the result, we see the ratio of foreign direct investments to GDP of Indonesia has been stagnant at around 1.5% to 2.5%. And to be precise, for the last 3 years, it has been declining based on the central bank data. It has been declining from 1.93% to now only 1.61%. Next, as we can see here, next, I take some of the ASEAN countries. We can see the ratio of FDI to GDP in Indonesia is 1.6%. That is lower compared to our peer countries. Next, so the way forward, a strategic shift. I propose a 7 strategic shift. You can go to the details in we have Aliansi Ekonomi Indonesia, we have Tujuh Desakan Darurat Ekonomi. So I just highlight some of the key points here. One is that I highlight on the strategic allocations. So again, the government should shift its mindset, not only spending, but the spending should be very strategic, targeting on the productive sectors, targeting sectors that have productive activities that have multiplier effects to the economy. So again, I would like to highlight MBG maximums, free lunch program, MBG maximums only 8 trillion Indonesian rupiah, and allocations for education, health, and infrastructure. Second, to improve purchasing power parity, it is important for us to have a comprehensive tax reforms, tax-free for those who are earning less than 100 million Indonesian rupiah, lower income tax, limit the value-added tax up to 8%. Currently, we have 12%. So limit up to 8% and implement a more progressive tax. Third, we need to ensure fair competitions for good quality jobs. So far, we have been squeezed, the private sector have been squeezed by state-owned enterprises. And the inventions of Danantara is even compounded this kind of crowding out in the private sectors. This is some things I want to share with you. Like many of countries, they want to learn from China and saying that the role of state-owned enterprises of China. But as we can see, like China starting in 1980s, this first time with China starting its reforms. At the time, state-owned enterprises, China owns 100% of total assets. But now it has been declining to only 25%. So we need really to think carefully on how state-owned enterprises play a role in the economy by ensuring that they are not crowding out the private sectors, particularly small, medium enterprises. Next, fourth is on the ensures quality of economic growth, and including also not only in soft and hard infrastructure, but also ensuring improving digital, robotics, and AI skills and capabilities. Fifth, this is something that I would like to highlight. what Professor Jiwandono emphasized in his key points is the importance of independence of economic and legal institutions, including Central Bank of Indonesia, KPK, Statistics Indonesia, BPK, Attorney Generals, Mahkamah Agung, and Mahkamah Konstitusi. 6, diversifications. As we can see, like we have been pressured so much with these geopolitical tensions. So diversifications is not an option, it is a must. It is a must for Indonesia to diversify in terms of trade in goods, trade in services, investments, as well as expanding the use of local currency and diversifies payment system. 7, it's important for us to accelerate the transitions to green and renewable energy towards solar panel and hydro in energy. And it is very important for us in the upcoming decades when we are facing expanding of data centers of digital technologies, robotics, and AI, which requires a lot of energies. And this is something that we need to keep in mind. Again, if you would like to go to the detail, you can go to Aliansi Ekonomi Indonesia for 7 Desakan Darurat Ekonomi. Next, I don't mean to promote my book, even though I always do. All of my books are publicly available. My latest book is The New Global Economic Order with Danny Roderick. You can just download it for free. Next. So, oh yeah, that's all. So yeah, just before we end, I heard, probably also heard many times that it's very difficult to have discussions with President Prabowo. So we hope that by having Professor Jiwandono here, he's gonna convey our message to President Prabowo. And I would like to emphasize, like, we academic students, we have no colors, we have no intentions. All what we are saying is just based on facts and data, and we are saying this to President Prabowo because we love Indonesia, because we care about Indonesia, because we want Indonesia to be a great nation as much as what he wants. And I just would like to highlight, please convey this to President Prabowo. Dear Mr. President, it is really indeed that Indonesia now at the crossroads. And this is your legacy, whether you want to listen to Indonesian people or you want to oppress our voices. This is your legacy, whether you want to stand with Indonesian people or you want to stand beside, to put our aside and just walking, ignoring us. This is really your legacy, whether you want to act based on Indonesia's welfare and based on Indonesia's call. And the last but most important one, the legacy is in your hands. Thank you.